It was the kind of Friday morning that made the whole world feel exhausted before the day had even begun. Rain crawled down the airport windows in long silver threads, turning the runway lights into blurred halos. The sky outside was bruised and heavy, and the air inside the terminal smelled like wet coats, burnt coffee, and the cold, recycled breath of too many travelers who all looked as tired as I felt. I had just landed after a brutal stretch of hospital shifts, and every bone in my body was begging for rest. For the last 2 weeks, I had lived beneath fluorescent lights, slept in snatched hours, and carried the cries of sick children home with me every night. My name was Felix Anderson, and I was a pediatric nurse. That meant I knew how to smile when my feet were numb, how to speak gently when my heart was breaking, and how to pretend I was fine when all I wanted was to collapse somewhere quiet. All I wanted that morning was to get out of the airport, take a taxi to my mother's small apartment, hug her until she complained that I was squeezing too hard, and forget the hospital for 48 hours. My uncle had called the night before, panicked and dramatic, telling me my mother had fallen ill and needed me. I had packed so quickly that I barely remembered what I had thrown into my suitcase. The only thing I knew for certain was that I could not waste time. I hurried through the terminal with my black suitcase rolling behind me, one hand gripping the handle, the other clutching my phone as I checked for messages from home. My mind was already halfway in my mother's kitchen, already hearing her scold me for losing weight, already smelling the spicy stew she always made when she wanted to prove she was not as fragile as everyone thought. Then the world slammed into me. One moment I was walking. The next, a hard, solid force collided with my shoulder and chest, and I stumbled backward with a startled gasp. My sneakers slid on the polished floor. My suitcase toppled. Someone else's suitcase crashed beside mine. My phone nearly flew out of my hand, and I landed awkwardly with one knee against the cold tile. "I'm so sorry," I blurted out before I even looked up. I wasn't watching where I was going. The words died in my throat. Standing above me was an alpha who looked like he had stepped out of a luxury advertisement and a nightmare at the same time. He was tall enough to block the terminal lights, broad-shouldered, beneath a dark tailored coat that probably cost more than my rent, and, dangerously still, in the middle of the chaos. His black hair was swept back from a sharp, elegant face, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds just before lightning struck. His scent reached me before his hand did. Cedarwood, clean smoke, expensive cologne, and something distinctly alpha that made my pulse trip in the most embarrassing way possible. I hated that my body noticed him before my pride could catch up. In my head, a treacherous little voice whispered, "Felix, this is exactly what your dream man would look like if your dream man also looked capable of buying an airline just because a flight attendant annoyed him. Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was deep and smooth, but not warm. It was the kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms, on phone calls that moved millions of dollars, in rooms where nobody dared interrupt. "I'm fine," I said quickly, cheeks heating as I tried to stand. He reached down without waiting for permission. His hand closed around mine, firm and warm, and he pulled me up so easily I almost stumbled into him again. For one humiliating second, I was close enough to notice the tiny raindrops caught on the collar of his coat and the severe line of his mouth. "Careful next time," he said. It was not rude exactly, but it was cold enough to remind me that a man like him did not live in the same universe as a nurse like me. "Right. Yes. Careful. Absolutely," I muttered, bending to collect my things. Our suitcases were identical. Black, hard shell, silver zipper, same size, same brand. I grabbed the one closest to my hand, still too flustered to think clearly. He took the other, his expression unreadable, and we separated with nothing more than a brief nod from him and one more awkward apology from me. I walked away too fast, my heart still hammering. I told myself it was because of the fall, not because of him. Definitely not because his scent still clung to the air around me. Near the coffee stand by the departure gates, I stopped to order a latte I did not really need. I told myself caffeine would help. While I waited, I glanced back toward the premium boarding area and saw him again. The Alpha moved through the terminal like the space had been built for him. Staff straightened when they saw him. Travelers shifted out of his path without realizing they were doing it. He handed his documents to the gate agent, who immediately became more polite than she had been to anyone else that morning. He was boarding a flight back toward the same city I had just escaped from. A strange feeling tugged at me. He was going toward the hospital district, toward my life of night shifts and emergency rooms, while I was running home to my mother. For some reason, it felt like the universe had crossed two lines on a map and then waited to see what would happen. "Sir, your latte!" I blinked, took the cup, and forced myself to look away. A man like that probably had a penthouse, private drivers, and people who ironed his shirts while wearing gloves. I had a cracked phone screen, a suitcase full of scrubs, and a mother who could defeat thieves with kitchen tools. That was the end of it. I was just about to head toward the taxi stand when a sharp movement at the gate made me stop. The boarding bridge was still connected. The aircraft door, which had already closed, opened again. Then the Alpha stepped out. He no longer looked calm. His face was pale, his jaw tight, and his eyes moved across the terminal with a frantic focus that made my stomach drop. He said something sharply to a crew member, then strode away from the gate with terrifying purpose. Straight toward me. My fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. Had I dropped something? Had there been a security issue? Was the flight cancelled? I barely had time to form the questions before he reached me, his shadow falling over me like a storm cloud. His hand shot out and closed around my wrist. It was not enough to hurt, but it was enough to make every nerve in my body go rigid. "Why did you do it?" he demanded. The smooth boardroom voice was gone. This voice was rough, sharp, and barely controlled. "Do what?" I snapped, more startled than afraid. "Let go of me!" "Why did you switch them?" His gaze dropped to the suitcase beside me, then back to my face. "Did you think I would not notice until it was too late? Did you think you could walk away from me with my property? For a moment, I could only stare." Then anger rose, so fast it burned through the embarrassment, the attraction, everything. "Are you accusing me of stealing from you?" I asked, voice trembling with disbelief. "I am a nurse. I spend my life holding children while they cry and trying to convince terrified parents to breathe. I don't steal from strangers in airports. I don't care how rich you are or how expensive your suitcase is. I would never take anything that wasn't mine." People around us began to slow down. A woman with a red umbrella stared openly. A man in a gray suit pretended to look at his phone while listening to every word. The terminal, which had been a river of movement seconds before, seemed to pause around us. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. "Then open it." "Excuse me?" "Open the suitcase," he said. Released my wrist, but remaining close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Now, I should have refused. I should have demanded security. I should have reminded him that he had no right to order me around, like one of his employees. But the way everyone was staring made my skin crawl, and a tiny thread of doubt had begun to twist inside me. The suitcases had looked exactly the same. With shaking hands, I crouched and worked the latches. "Please, I thought desperately. Please let this be mine. Please let him be wrong. The lid opened. My heart dropped. Inside were no folded scrubs, no worn hoodie, no plastic bag of medicine for my mother, no hospital shoes. Instead, there were rows of immaculate silk shirts, a velvet-lined watch case, a leather portfolio embossed with initials, and a stack of documents clipped with a gold pen. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and money. It was not my suitcase. I didn't know, I whispered. The Alpha watched my face with an intensity that made me feel like he was looking for cracks in my soul. It was an accident, I insisted, louder this time. We crashed into each other. They looked the same. I grabbed the wrong one, that's all. Convenient, he said. The insult struck harder than his grip had. You arrogant. What's going on here? A security officer appeared beside us, his hand settling heavily on my shoulder. His eyes took in the scene in a single unfair glance. One flushed Omega kneeling beside a suitcase full of luxury goods, one furious Alpha in a tailored coat, and half a terminal watching. Sir, the officer said to the Alpha, already choosing a side, is there a problem? A misunderstanding, I said quickly, standing. We switched suitcases by mistake. The officer's grip tightened. Come with me, please. Wait, I didn't. He pulled me upward. In the sudden jerk, the side pocket of my coat snagged against the suitcase latch. A few things slipped out. A pen, a folded receipt, and a glossy photograph I had tucked away before leaving the hospital. The picture fluttered to the floor. Wait, I said, panic cutting through me. The photo. Give that back. The Alpha bent first. He picked it up with long, careful fingers, and the second his eyes landed on it, all the anger drained from his face. He went white. Not pale. White. His entire body locked as if the air had turned to ice around him. The photograph trembled in his grip. It was a simple picture. Me in blue hospital scrubs, sitting on the edge of a pediatric bed, arms wrapped around a little girl with bright eyes and a bandage on her forehead. She was smiling sleepily against my shoulder, clutching a stuffed rabbit someone from the ward had given her. I had kept the photo because she had insisted I take it before I left. The Alpha stared at the girl, then at me, then back at the girl. His hand shook so violently the photograph rattled. He stepped toward me, and this time the desperation in his eyes frightened me more than his anger had. This child, he said, voice breaking. Where is she? I forgot the crowd. I forgot the security officer. I forgot the suitcase. What? He shoved the photograph toward me as if I might deny it. The girl in this picture. Where is she? Tell me now. She's my patient, I said slowly. Or, she was. I'm a pediatric nurse at St. Adelaide Hospital. She was placed in temporary care near the ward because nobody could find her family. His breath caught so sharply it sounded painful. When did you last see her? Yesterday morning, I said. Before I came here. I said goodbye to her before my break. Why are you asking me this? His thumb brushed the girl's face in the photograph with a tenderness so raw it made my chest tighten. Because her name is Belle, he whispered. And she is my daughter. She has been missing for 30 days. The world seemed to tilt again, but this time there was no impact, no flaw, no easy explanation. The security officer cleared his throat, suddenly uncertain. The Alpha did not look at him. His voice returned to its cold command for one brief second.
This was a mistake.
I will handle it. The officer hesitated, then released my arm and stepped back into the crowd. The watching travelers began to move again, disappointed that the airport drama had become something too private to enjoy. I stood frozen, staring at the man in front of me. Your daughter? I repeated. Yes! His voice cracked on the word. I wanted to doubt him. I knew better than to hand a vulnerable child to the first rich man who claimed her. I had seen too much in hospitals. False relatives, desperate lies, people who wore grief like a costume. But this Alpha did not look like a man pretending. He looked like someone who had been surviving on the edge of a cliff for a month and had just glimpsed a rope. He took my hand again, but this time his touch was careful. Urgent, yes, but not cruel. Please, he said. And that single word sounded like it had cost him everything. Come with me, just for a minute. He led me away from the crowd into a quieter alcove behind a row of closed check-in counters. The airport noise faded into a dull hum. Rain clicked softly against the glass. Up close, I could see shadows beneath his eyes that no expensive suit could hide. I need you to tell me everything, he said. Everything you know about her. First, I said, forcing my voice steady, I need proof. I won't help a stranger reach a child just because he says the right name. For the first time, something like respect crossed his face. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. His fingers shook as he unlocked it and opened his gallery. Photo after photo filled the screen. Belle on a swing, laughing as he pushed her. Belle asleep on his chest, one tiny hand curled around his shirt. Belle in a yellow raincoat with duck-shaped buttons. Belle with flour on her nose in a kitchen, bigger than my entire apartment. Belle grinning beside a birthday cake while the Alpha, still stern even in party photos, looked at her like she was sunlight itself. The yellow raincoat made my knees weak. That was what she had been wearing when she was brought in. Torn, muddy, soaked through, the little duck buttons scratched from branches and stone. "Oh my God," I whispered. His phone lowered. "You believe me? I believe you know her," I said. "And I believe she knows you. She cried for her daddy for 2 days. She kept pointing toward the woods, but she was injured and scared. No one could understand exactly where she had come from." He closed his eyes as if my words had physically struck him. "What happened?" I asked softly. He opened his eyes again, and the story came out low and ragged. "We were traveling through the northern woods. I had a business meeting in a mountain district. I should not have taken her with me, but my ex-partner had been threatening custody again. I was afraid to leave Belle behind. On the way back, there was a storm. The road gave way near a slope. The car spun, hit the barrier, and slid into the trees. I blacked out. When I woke, the back door was open, and her car seat was empty. He swallowed hard. I searched until I collapsed. My people searched. The police searched. Drones, dogs, private investigators, every resource money could buy. We found scraps of fabric, a broken toy, footprints that vanished in the mud. Then nothing. 30 days of nothing. His jaw tightened. Last night, I finally got a lead that a child matching her description had been seen near the hospital district. I was flying there when I opened that suitcase and realized it was not mine. Then I found your ID, your hospital badge, and that photo. The final boarding call for his flight echoed through the terminal. Flight 208, final boarding. All remaining passengers must proceed to gate B12. Doors closing. In 3 minutes. He did not move. "That's your flight," I said. "I don't care. You were heading to the hospital district. Belle is there. You can still make it if you hurry." "No." His eyes locked on mine. "You are the first living person who can tell me she was safe. You know where she is. You know who cared for her. You are coming with me." There it was again. Command. Can. Assumption. The alpha habit of treating the world like a locked door that would open if he pushed hard enough. "I am not one of your employees," I said. "You don't order me onto a plane." Something flickered across his face, but desperation swallowed it. "Name your price," he said. 100,000. $500,000. A million. Whatever you want. I will pay it now. Come with me on a private charter. Take me to my daughter. And you never have to work another double shift again. I stared at him. The tiny warmth I had felt when he said please vanished. That is your problem, I said quietly. He frowned. My problem? You think money is the key to every door. You think people are waiting around with price tags hidden under their collars. You think you can buy time, compassion, trust, someone's life, someone's exhaustion, someone's mother, all because you are used to people saying yes when you write enough zeros. His face hardened, but I kept going. I would help you for free if I could. I would turn around right now if there was nothing else waiting for me. But my mother is sick. My uncle called me last night and told me she could barely get out of bed. She is the only family I have left. I came here because I thought she needed me. So no, James, Sterling, or whoever you are, I am not getting on your plane this second. His eyes sharpened at the name I had guessed from the initials on his suitcase, but he did not correct me. If I let you leave, he said slowly. How do I know you will come back? Because I said I would. People say many things. Then, take my number, take my address, take my hospital ID. I am a nurse, not a ghost. Not enough. I stared. Excuse me? His expression settled into terrifying calm. If you need to see your mother, fine, I will go with you. After that, we leave for the hospital. For a second, I was certain I had misheard. You want to follow me to my mother's apartment? Yes. You are a billionaire alpha who just abandoned a first-class flight. Yes? And you are going to spend the night in a tiny apartment with a nurse you accused of theft 10 minutes ago? If that is what it takes to find Belle, yes. I should have laughed. I almost did. But there was no humor in his face, only an iron, desperate certainty. I looked toward the rain-streaked windows, then back at him. Fine, I said. But you do not accuse me of stealing again. You do not touch me without asking again. And you do not scare my mother. His gaze lowered briefly, almost like shame. Agreed. And you carry your own suitcase. A faint, exhausted ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Agreed. That was how I ended up in a taxi with James Sterling, the billionaire alpha whose daughter had been sleeping in the pediatric ward I had just left, while rain dragged silver lines down the windows and the city unrolled gray and wet around us. The silence in the car was heavy enough to bruise. I sat pressed against the door, my correct suitcase finally in my lap like a shield. James sat beside me, staring out at the passing streets with the stillness of a man forcing himself not to break apart. He had swapped our luggage back without another word, and now his hands rested on his knees, fingers flexing occasionally, as if they were remembering the shape of the photograph. Felix Anderson, he said suddenly. I looked at him. What? Your name. It was on your hospital badge. Most people ask before reading private information. Most people do not walk away with my suitcase. I glared. He exhaled, and for the first time the cold edge of him softened slightly. I'm sorry. That was unnecessary. The apology surprised me enough that I forgot my next insult. James Sterling, he said after a moment. Since you already guessed part of it. I didn't guess. Your portfolio had your initials stamped on it like a royal seal. It is not a royal seal. It looked expensive enough to have its own security team. His mouth twitched. It was not a smile, not fully, but it made him look almost human. Do you always talk this much when you are nervous? He asked. Do you always interrogate people after kidnapping yourself into their family emergencies? I am. You are absolutely kidnapping yourself. You have attached yourself to me like an extremely wealthy shadow. This time, the corner of his mouth lifted for half a second before it disappeared. The taxi crossed into the older district where my mother lived. The buildings grew smaller, the streets narrower, the shops more familiar. I watched James take in the cracked sidewalks, the faded awnings, the laundry lines between balconies, and for some reason I felt defensive. "It's not fancy," I said. I didn't say anything. Your face did. My face is thinking about my daughter, nothing else. That shut me up. When the taxi stopped in front of my mother's little apartment building, I was already bracing myself for the worst. I imagined finding her pale in bed, coughing beneath blankets, angry at everyone for worrying, but secretly grateful that I had come. I grabbed my suitcase and rushed toward the gate. Then I froze. My mother was in the small front garden wearing a bright apron and trimming the hedges with a pair of shears. She was humming. Her cheeks were pink from the cold air, her posture straight, and she looked healthier than I did. "Mom?" I shouted. She turned and her whole face lit up. "Felix, my sweet boy! You're finally home." She dropped the shears and hurried toward me. I nearly tripped over my suitcase in disbelief. "Are you okay?" I grabbed her shoulder, studying her face. "Uncle Marco said you were bedridden. He said you could barely move. He said I had to come immediately." My mother, Maria Anderson, had the grace to look mildly guilty for approximately 2 seconds. Then she laughed. "That old fox made it sound worse than it was." "Worse?" "I had a little fever last week. A tiny fever. Barely worth mentioning. But you never come home unless someone is dying, so I may have allowed him to be dramatic." I stared at her. "Mom, don't use that nurse voice on me. I gave birth to you. I flew across the country because I thought you were seriously ill. And now you're here. See?" The plan worked. I covered my face with both hands. Behind me, I felt James stop at the gate. The air changed with his presence, cooler and heavier. My mother noticed immediately. Of course she did. She could smell gossip from 3 neighborhoods away. Her eyes moved past me and widened. "Oh," she said, dragging the word out shamelessly. "Felix, who is this handsome gentleman?" "Don't," I warned. "Is he your boyfriend?" "Mom." "Because if he is, I approve." "He looks expensive, but in a tasteful way. I wanted the ground to open and swallow me." James, instead of looking offended, stepped forward and inclined his head with polished respect. "Mrs. Anderson, my name is James Sterling. I apologize for intruding. Your son is helping me with an urgent family matter." My mother's expression shifted instantly. Beneath her jokes and theatrical schemes, she had a heart too soft for suffering. She looked at the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, and understood enough. "Come in, James Sterling," she said gently. "Whatever happened, you look like you need hot food." "Mom, this is serious," I said quickly. "His daughter is the little girl from my ward. Belle. The one I told you about. The one found near the woods. She's been missing from him for a month. I have to take him back tomorrow and show him where she is." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, that poor child." She stepped toward James and, without asking permission, patted his arm. "You will find her. My Felix is stubborn, but he is good. If your daughter was with him, then she had someone kind beside her." James looked at me. It was only a second, but something in his gaze lingered. I looked away first. "Let's go inside," I muttered. "Before Mom starts planning a wedding." "I heard that," she said. "You were." Inside, the apartment was warm, cluttered, and full of life in a way James's expensive silence could never be. Family photos lined the hallway. A chipped blue vase held dried flowers on the shelf. The kitchen table was scarred from years of meals, arguments, homework, and my mother's habit of chopping vegetables directly on the wood no matter how many cutting boards I bought her. James looked absurdly out of place there, standing beneath the low ceiling in his tailored coat, while my mother handed him house slippers with cartoon bears on them. To his credit, he put them on. I nearly laughed when I saw the powerful billionaire Alpha in bear slippers, but one look at his tired face stopped me. His mind was not in the room. It was already racing back to Belle. My mother cooked as if she were feeding a small army. Soon the kitchen filled with the smell of spicy stew, steamed dumplings, fried scallions, and ginger tea. James sat stiffly at the table at first, but after the first spoonful, his expression changed. "This is excellent," he said. My mother beamed as if he had handed her a medal. "Of course it is. I used to run a restaurant before my niece started arguing with me. Felix tells me hospital food is terrible, so I had to make sure he remembered what real cooking tastes like." "Hospital food is not terrible," I said. "You once described soup from the cafeteria as warm sadness." James's eyes flicked to me. "It was accurate at the time," I muttered. For a little while, against all logic, the tension eased. My mother told stories about neighbors, about her old restaurant, about the time 3 thieves had tried to break into the back window, and she had chased them away with a frying pan and a jar of pickled peppers. "One of them cried," she said proudly. "A grown man cried for his mother." "She kept his shoe as a trophy," I told James. James froze with his spoon halfway to his mouth. "That is true?" "Of course," my mother said. "I keep it in the storage closet. A reminder that crime does not pay, especially near my kitchen." A sound escaped James. It was small, rough, and almost startled. A laugh. Not a polite laugh. A real one, fragile but real. My mother noticed. I noticed. James noticed that we noticed and immediately looked down at his bowl like the stew required deep analysis. The rain returned after sunset, drumming steadily against the roof. My mother eventually retired to her room, but not before making up the sofa with extra blankets and telling James he was too thin for a rich man. "Mom, he is not too thin. He is pale. He has been searching for his missing daughter. Then he needs soup. You already fed him 3 bowls. Grief eats faster than soup can fill." That silenced both of us. After she closed her door, the apartment felt suddenly smaller. James stood near the window, watching rain slide over the glass. I stood by the hallway, holding a towel and trying not to think about the fact that an alpha billionaire was about to shower in my bathroom. "You can wash up first," I said. "The hot water is moody, so don't insult it." "The water? The pipes. The heater. The entire building. Just be respectful." He looked at me as though unsure whether I was joking. "I'm serious." He took the towel from me. Our fingers brushed, and the contact sent a stupid little spark up my arm. I retreated to the kitchen like a coward. When I knocked on the bathroom door later with a spare toothbrush, the door opened just enough for steam to curl out. James leaned into the gap, hair damp, shoulders bare, water glistening along the hard lines of his collarbone. My brain stopped working. "Toothbrush," I said, holding it out like an offering to a dangerous god. "Thank you," he said. His voice had dropped lower, softened by exhaustion, and his fingers brushed mine again when he took it. This time I definitely fled. "Get yourself together," I hissed in my bedroom, pressing both hands to my face. "He accused you of theft. He is emotionally unavailable. He probably owns a helicopter. This is not romantic. This is a logistical crisis." My room was small, with a narrow desk, shelves stuffed with medical books, and a bed that was technically wide enough for 2 people if both of them were very committed to not moving. The couch in the sitting room was shorter than James and close to the balcony door, where mosquitoes gathered like a tiny army. When he entered wearing borrowed sweatpants, that were slightly too short, and a plain shirt that somehow still looked expensive because he was wearing it. The room shrank to half its size. "You can take the bed," I said too quickly. "I'll sleep in the sitting room."
The word? The couch is too small.
I am used to uncomfortable sleeping arrangements. Hospital break room chairs built my character. "You are the only person who can take me to Belle. If you sleep badly, get sick, or injure your neck trying to prove a point, it affects tomorrow." That is the least romantic argument anyone has ever made for sharing a bed. He blinked. I realized what I had said and wanted to dissolve into the floor. I mean, no, not romantic, obviously. I meant practical, not romantic. Forget I used that word. For the second time that day, his mouth almost smiled. "The bed is large enough," he said. "We are adults. We can share it." My internal organ staged a rebellion. "Fine," I said, trying for dignity and achieving something closer to strangled panic. "But stay on your side. Of course." We turned off the light. Rain whispered against the window. My mother coughed once in the next room and then fell quiet. James lay on his back, still as stone. I clung to the edge of the mattress, staring into darkness, painfully aware of every breath he took. After a long time, his voice came quietly. "Felix." "Yes?" Was she afraid? I knew who he meant. My throat tightened. "At first," I said softly. "She was terrified. She kept asking for you. She didn't understand why you weren't there. But she was brave. So brave, James. She let us clean the wound on her forehead. She held my hand when she had nightmares. She learned the names of every nurse on the floor. She shared her pudding with another child, even though she loved pudding." His breath shook. "Did she think I left her?" The question was so quiet it hurt. I turned my head on the pillow. In the moonlight, his profile looked carved from grief. "No," I said. "She thought you were lost. She told me every night that her daddy would come when he knew where she was." He covered his eyes with one hand. "Thank you," he whispered. I did not know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. "We'll bring you to her tomorrow." That night, sleep came slowly. When it finally took me, it was deep and dreamless. I woke to warmth. Not blanket warmth, body warmth. The kind that surrounded me from one side, steady and solid. I shifted, sighed, and tightened my arm around what I thought was my body pillow. The pillow made a low, amused sound. My eyes snapped open. I was sprawled across James Sterling like ivy on a wall. One arm lay across his chest. One leg was shamelessly hooked over his thigh. My cheek had been resting against his shoulder, and his hand hovered near my waist as if he had not known where to put it. He was awake, leaning against the headboard and reading something on his phone with the calm of a man who regularly woke up with strange nurses attached to him. "Good morning," he said. I launched myself backward so fast I nearly fell out of bed. "I am so sorry," I gasped. "I don't usually attack people in my sleep. I mean, not attack. Cling. I don't usually cling. Actually, I don't know. I sleep alone, so there are no witnesses." His eyes held a faint glint. "You looked like you were finally resting. I didn't want to wake you. You should have shoved me onto the floor. Your mother would have attacked me with a frying pan." I glanced at the clock and nearly screamed. 7. "We need to get to the airport. We won't get seats." "We need to. I booked them already," James said. I froze halfway out of bed. "What?" "Flight at 10. First class suite. Driver arrives in 40 minutes. Eat, pack, and try not to injure yourself. Last minute. Nah, tickets are impossible." He looked at me as though I had said the sky was made of soup. Not impossible. Expensive. That is a horrible sentence. But accurate. In the kitchen, my mother had made breakfast as if we were leaving for war. Fried dough, dumplings, eggs, tea, fruit, 2 kinds of sauce, and a covered container of food for the journey. James watched her move around the kitchen with something like wonder. "She could run a five-star kitchen," he said quietly. "She used to run a restaurant," I replied. "People still ask when she will open again. She says she's retired, but she cooks like someone preparing for a comeback." "She should have one," I glanced at him. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." He met my eyes. "I don't say things I don't mean." There was a dangerous sincerity in his voice that made me look away. At the gate, my mother hugged me for so long that my chest ached. "Bring the child back," she whispered. "And bring yourself back, too. You have a soft heart, Felix. Don't leave pieces of it everywhere without checking who is holding them." "Mom, I am serious." Then she took James's hand in both of hers. "When you find your daughter," she said, "bring her here. I want to feed her. A child who has cried that much needs dumplings." James' cold mask broke completely. "I promise," he said. "I will bring her." The trip back felt different from the trip there. At the airport, people still moved around James like he carried invisible authority. But he stayed close to me, less like a captor now, and more like a man afraid that if he let hope move too far from him, it would vanish. At the first-class counter, the agent straightened immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Your suite is ready." "Suite?" I whispered as we walked away. "On a plane?" "Yes. James, economy is fine. I have survived 16-hour shifts on vending machine crackers. I do not require a flying bedroom." "Your comfort matters." "My comfort is not a corporate project." He stopped and looked at me. "Felix, you are leading me to my daughter. If I can make the journey easier for you, I will. Do not turn every kindness into an argument." That shut me up more effectively than money ever could. On the plane, clouds swallowed the windows until the world outside became an endless white sea. The first-class cabin was quiet, private, and ridiculous. My seat reclined into a bed. Someone offered me champagne before noon. I declined because I did not trust myself around James and alcohol in the same cabin. For a while, we said nothing. Then I asked, "What about your company?" He looked at me. "You must have people waiting on decisions, meetings, contracts. Whatever billionaires do when they are not accusing nurses of suitcase crimes." He gave a hollow laugh. "Let it burn." I blinked. "James, I mean it," he said, turning toward the window. "I built Sterling Group from almost nothing. I spent years believing that power meant safety. Money meant control. Influence meant no one could take from me. Then, my daughter vanished from a roadside in the rain, and every empire I built became useless." He looked back at me, and the pain in his eyes was no longer hidden. "Belle is the only thing in my life that has ever felt real." The words settled between us. Slowly, he told me the rest. About his former partner. About betrayal discovered shortly after Belle's birth. About the DNA test he had taken with shaking hands, terrified that the only light in his life might be taken from him too. About the relief when the result proved Belle was his. About the divorce, the custody battles, the way wealthy people could make cruelty look polite with lawyers and signatures. "I was afraid to leave her," he said. "That is why she was with me that day. I told myself I was protecting her. Then I woke up in that wrecked car, and she was gone." His hand pressed briefly to his ribs, as if the old injury still lived there. I told him my side. I told him about walking home after a late shift because the bus had been delayed. About the shortcut near the trees. About hearing a tiny broken voice crying for daddy. About running toward the sound with my phone flashlight, shaking in my hand. About finding Belle under a rain-lashed tree, soaked, bleeding, and trembling so hard I thought her bones might break. She kept pointing back, I said, my own tears rising despite my efforts.
She said you were hurt. See?
She said Daddy needed help. But she was 4, James. She was concussed and terrified. We searched the area she pointed toward, but the storm had washed everything away. Nobody found the car. Nobody connected her to the accident report because she was found outside the mapped search zone. The touch was firm, warm, and different from the airport. Not control, gratitude. You saved her, he said, voice shaking. You carried my daughter out of the dark when I couldn't. I looked down at our joined hands. I just did what anyone should have done. No, he said. You did what many people would have walked past because it was raining, because it was inconvenient, because they were tired. Do not make your goodness smaller just because it comes naturally to you. My throat tightened. Under the steady hum of the aircraft, somewhere between 2 cities and 2 lives, the sharp edges between us softened. I was no longer just the nurse with the wrong suitcase. He was no longer just the cold Alpha, who had mistaken panic for arrogance. We were 2 people tied together by a child who waited faithfully for both of us. When we landed, James moved with frightening efficiency. A car was already waiting. Calls were made. Doors opened before we reached them. The world bent around him again, but now I saw the fear driving every command. We reached the children's care home beside St. Adelaide Hospital just after noon. It was a modest building with cheerful paint, old windows, and a playground that needed repairs. My heart pounded as we hurried inside. Mrs. Gable, the receptionist, looked up from her desk. Felix? I thought you were on leave. Change of plans, I said, breathless. This is James Sterling. He is Belle's father. For 1 second, she froze. Then her eyes filled with tears. Oh, thank heaven, she whispered. That sweet child has been waiting every day. James made a sound that was almost a sob. Mrs. Gable grabbed her keys and led us down the hall. The walls were covered in children's drawings. Suns, houses, crooked flowers, stick figures holding hands. One drawing near the playroom door stopped James in his tracks. It showed a small girl in a yellow raincoat between 2 tall figures. One had black hair and a serious face. The other wore blue scrubs. Above them, in uneven letters, Belle had written, Daddy and Nurse Felix will find me. James touched the paper with trembling fingers. She made that yesterday, Mrs. Gable said softly. I could not speak. Through the glass doors, children ran and laughed among blocks and toy cars. But Belle sat alone on a wooden bench in the corner, her stuffed rabbit tucked beneath one arm. Her eyes were fixed on the door as if she had been staring at it for 30 days and refused to blink in case Hope walked through. James stepped inside. Belle! He whispered. The little girl's head lifted. For 1 heartbeat, nobody moved. Then her eyes went wide. Daddy! The scream tore through the playroom like sunlight breaking glass. She ran. James dropped to his knees. He caught her with both arms, pulling her against him so tightly I could see his shoulders shaking. Belle wrapped herself around his neck and sobbed into his coat. Daddy, I told them you would come. I told them. I'm here, he cried, his voice broken beyond recognition. I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry. I searched everywhere. I never stopped. I love you so much. The room blurred. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my jacket, pretending I was not crying as hard as half the staff. Belle lifted her head suddenly and saw me. Nurse Felix! She wriggled from James just enough to throw one arm around my neck while still clinging to him with the other. You found my daddy, she whispered. I knew you were a superhero. I knelt beside them and hugged her gently. No, sweetheart, I said. You were the brave one. You waited for him. James looked at us then, Belle between us. his face wet with tears and transformed by a kind of relief so deep it was almost painful to witness. The paperwork took hours. Identity confirmations, medical records, police notifications, social services, signatures, statements. James handled it all with steel in his voice and Belle in his lap. He did not let go of her except when absolutely necessary, and even then his eyes never left her. She wanted me beside her when the doctor checked her forehead. She wanted me to tell James how she had learned to braid her doll's hair. She wanted James to know I had promised he was looking for her. He was, I said each time. He was looking very hard. Every time I said it, James's eyes found mine. By evening, Belle was officially released into his care. The return journey felt unreal. On the plane, Belle sat between us, one hand in James's and one hand in mine, as if she feared we might vanish if she loosened her grip. James ordered blankets, warm milk, toys, clothes, anything she mentioned, and several things she did not. I scolded him when he tried to buy an entire online toy store. She needs rest, not a warehouse, I said. Belle giggled. James looked almost sheepish. I missed a month. You cannot replace a month with stuffed animals. Watch me try. It should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded like a father desperate to pour love into the gap where fear had lived. When we landed, 3 black SUVs waited near the private exit. I stared at them. Are we being escorted by a government agency? Security, James said. Of course. Silly me. Normal people travel with snacks. You travel with a convoy. Belle laughed again, and James's face softened at the sound like he would have bought the entire airport just to hear it twice. I thought he would take Belle home and then send me back to my apartment with a polite thank you. Instead, the car drove through iron gates and up a long path lined with trees and lanterns. A mansion rose ahead, pale stone glowing under the evening lights, surrounded by gardens, fountains, and the kind of silence only money could purchase.
James!
I said slowly. Where are we? Home. Your home? Belle's home, he said. Then, after a pause, and yours tonight, if you will stay. She asked for you. Belle, half asleep against his side, nodded without opening her eyes. Nursey Felix stays. What was I supposed to do? Say no to a reunited child clinging to my sleeve?
The mansion's entrance hall looked like something from a film.
Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, chandeliers like frozen rain, walls lined with art that probably had insurance policies larger than my student loans. I felt afraid to breathe too close to anything. James noticed. You can touch things, he said. That vase looks older than my country of origin. Spoken like a man who has never checked his bank balance before buying groceries. He looked at me, and instead of dismissing it, he seemed to absorb it. You are right, he said quietly. I have forgotten what that feels like. That honesty startled me. The staff welcomed Belle with tears. An older housekeeper named Agnes cried openly when Belle ran into her arms. A security chief stood rigid with emotion until Belle ordered him to smile because she was home. James watched everything with one hand pressed to his mouth, as though he was afraid the sight would undo him. That night, Belle refused to sleep unless I stayed beside her. James had prepared a pink and gold bedroom full of toys, but she wanted the guest suite because it was closer to where I was. She fell asleep with her head on my lap while I stroked her hair and told her the rain had stopped. James stood in the doorway. You are good with her, he said softly. She's easy to love. His eyes warmed in a way that made my chest feel too small. Yes, he whispered. She is. The next morning arrived with sunlight spilling over gardens I did not belong in. Reality returned with it. I had shifts waiting. My mother, rent. A life measured in bus schedules and hospital rotations. Not marble hallways and private chefs. Belle was home. James had his daughter. My part was over. I packed my small bag and found them in the foyer. Belle wore a new yellow dress and carried her rabbit. James stood beside her with an envelope in his hand. My stomach sank. "Felix," he said, "I want you to accept this." I already knew what it was before he opened it. A check. The number on it was so large, my brain refused to count the zeros properly. "No," I said immediately. "You haven't even considered it. I don't need to. This is nothing compared to what you gave me. It would secure your mother's future. Yours. You could stop exhausting yourself at the hospital. You could. James." I pushed the envelope back toward him. I did not carry Belle out of the woods because I hoped a rich father would pay me. I did it because she was a child crying in the rain. "Please do not turn that into a transaction." He looked wounded, then ashamed. "I only wanted to thank you." "Then say thank you." For a moment, neither of us moved.
Then he lowered the envelope.
Thank you!
He said. And the words were quiet, stripped of pride. "For saving my daughter. For believing her. For believing me, eventually. For coming back when you had every reason to walk away." My anger softened. "You're welcome." A small hand tugged my sleeve. Belle looked up at me, eyes shining with tears. My heart cracked. "Sweetheart, stay with us," she said. "You can be my mommy. Daddy said I need people who love me. You love me." The air left the room. I looked at James. His face was still unreadable, but his eyes were not. They were dark, intent, full of something he was not brave enough to say yet. I crouched in front of Belle and took her little hands. "You are the sweetest girl in the world," I whispered. "But I am just Nurse Felix. I have a job. I have my mom. I don't belong in a place like this." "You belong with me," she said stubbornly. I almost broke. Instead, I kissed her forehead, stood, and forced myself to walk toward the door. James followed me outside. Morning mist curled over the driveway. The estate was quiet, except for birds and the distant sound of gardeners working somewhere beyond the hedges. "Felix," he said. I stopped but did not turn around. "Is it the money, the house, my life?" "All of it," I admitted, "and none of it. I don't know how to stand beside someone like you without disappearing into your world. I don't know how to be wanted by a child who lost so much. I don't know how to trust that this isn't just gratitude dressed up as something else." He was silent for a long time. "I don't know either," he said finally. "But I know the house felt alive last night for the first time in years. I know Belle slept without nightmares because you were near. I know I looked at you holding her and felt something I thought grief had killed in me." My hand tightened around my bag strap. "James!" "I won't trap you," he said. "I did enough of that at the airport. Go, if you need to. But do not call yourself just a nurse again. Not in front of me. Not after what you have done." I left before I could cry in his driveway like a fool. The moment the mansion doors closed behind me, I felt the hollow ache of leaving a home that had never been mine. I returned to my mother's apartment and tried to act normal. I unpacked. I checked her blood pressure even though she complained. I answered messages from the hospital. I made tea. I pretended not to look at my phone every 10 minutes. My mother watched me with the sharp eyes of a woman who had survived enough life to recognize denial. "You look miserable," she said that night. "Thank you. Very comforting. Did the handsome Alpha hurt you?" "No." "Did the child reject you?" "No." "Then why are you acting like someone stole your favorite blanket?" I stared into my tea. Belle asked me to stay. My mother's expression softened. "And James? He didn't ask." "Not exactly. Men like that are sometimes very brave with money and very cowardly with feelings." I let out a weak laugh. "Mom." "Am I wrong?" I thought of James's trembling hand on the photograph, his voice when he said Belle was real, the way he had looked at me in the doorway while his daughter slept. "No," I whispered. "I don't think you are." The next morning, just after sunrise, someone knocked on the apartment door. Not a polite knock. A determined rhythmic knock that made my mother call from the kitchen. "Felix, if that is your uncle, tell him I am still angry about the fake death performance." I opened the door. James stood there in a simple linen shirt and dark trousers, looking less like an untouchable CEO and more like a man who had not slept because his heart had finally become louder than his fear. Belle sat on his hip, beaming as if she had personally arranged the sunrise. "Nurse Felix!" she chirped, reaching for me. Daddy said yes. He said, "You can be my mommy now and you never have to leave again." My mouth fell open. "Belle," James said softly, though he did not look particularly sorry. I stared at him. "Did you rehearse that?" She refused to let me knock until I agreed to her exact wording. Belle nodded proudly. "She's a strong negotiator," he added. "I can see that." James lowered Belle to the floor, and she ran past me into the apartment, shouting for my mother. My mother appeared with flour on her hands, saw James in the doorway, saw my face, and smiled like a woman witnessing the final scene of a play she had predicted in the first act. "Come in," she said. "Do not stand there blocking destiny. Mom, please." James did not come in immediately. He stayed on the threshold, eyes fixed on mine. "Felix," he said, "Belle is right about one thing. I want you in our lives. Not because I owe you. Not because I need a nurse. Not because you saved her and I mistook gratitude for affection. I spent years surrounded by people who wanted my name, my money, my influence. Then I met someone who refused all of it and still gave me the most precious thing I had lost." His voice deepened. "You cared for Belle when she had nothing to offer you. You challenged me when I deserved it. You saw me at my worst and did not use it against me. I do not know how to do this perfectly. I only know that when you walked away yesterday, the house felt empty in a way it never had before." My heart beat so hard I could barely breathe. "James, this is fast. I know. Messy. I know. I have a life. Then let me make room for it, not erase it. Your work matters. Your mother matters. Your choices matter. I am not asking you to become a decoration in my house. I am asking you to let us become part of your life and to let us make you part of ours." Behind him, Belle had already climbed into my mother's lap and was explaining that dumplings were important for family meetings. My mother looked over Belle's head and mouthed, "Say yes." I ignored her badly. "And if I say I need time?" I asked. "Then I will wait," James said. "But I will not pretend I only came to thank you. I came because my daughter loves you. And because I am beginning to understand that I do too." The words landed softly and shattered me anyway. I had spent so much of my life being needed. Needed by patients, by families, by my mother, by the hospital. Being wanted was different. Being seen was different. James looked at me as if I was not a convenience, not a bridge, not a nurse-shaped solution to a crisis, but a person who had walked into the wreckage of his life and left light behind. "You are impossible," I whispered. "I have been told, arrogant. Also true. Terrible at communication. Improving. You accused me of stealing. I will apologize for that for the rest of my life, if necessary." I tried not to smile. Failed. "Come in, James." His face changed, not like in movies. But the tension around his eyes loosened, and the man standing at my door looked, for one brief second, almost young with relief. The rest of that morning was warm chaos. My mother fed everyone. Belle declared herself in charge of seating. James sat at our small table in the bare slippers. My mother insisted he wear again, because she had decided they suited him. We talked Not like strangers recovering from a crisis, but like people carefully building the first beams of something that might become a home. Life did not transform overnight, despite Belle's firm belief that families should be assembled instantly like toy castles. It changed slowly, then all at once. James made space. That was the first miracle. He did not demand that I quit the hospital. He arranged drivers when my shifts ended late, then backed off when I told him I could take the bus sometimes because I needed to remember I still belonged to myself. He visited my mother with Belle and learned to chop vegetables under her merciless supervision. He donated quietly to St. Adelaide's pediatric ward, not in my name, not as a performance, but because he had seen the cracked chairs in the waiting room and the outdated monitors near the nurse's station. Belle healed too. Some nights she still woke crying, reaching for James. Some days rain made her quiet. When that happened, James held her and let her cry. He no longer tried to buy away fear with toys. He learned that love was often sitting still while someone trembled. I learned things as well. I learned James took his coffee black, but secretly liked the sweet milk tea my mother made. I learned he worked like a machine, until Belle climbed into his lap, at which point every empire on earth could wait. I learned he had very little patience for board members, but endless patience for Belle's bedtime questions. I learned he was not cold because he felt nothing. He was cold because everything he felt had once been used against him. One evening, weeks after Belle came home, James took me back to the care home. Trucks filled the driveway. Workers carried new mattresses, toys, bookshelves, boxes of winter coats, and crates of fresh food. Mrs. Gable stood at the entrance crying into a handkerchief. "James," I said softly, "what did you do?" He watched a worker carry a small blue bed frame inside. Belle waited here. Other children are still waiting. They should wait somewhere warm. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw the truth of him. Money had been his shield for so long that he had forgotten it could also be a tool. In his hands, guided by grief and gratitude, it was becoming something gentler. My mother got her miracle too. James did not simply buy her a restaurant. He asked her first, which shocked her so much. She accused him of being raised properly after all. He found a small place in the heart of the city with big windows, a bright kitchen, and enough room for her to teach young cooks who needed work. She named it Maria's Table and pretended not to cry when she saw the sign. "This is too much," I told James on opening night. He stood beside me in the crowd, Belle asleep against his shoulder. "No," he said. "This is a beginning." Good deeds, I thought, watching my mother laugh beneath warm restaurant lights, are like seeds. You plant them in the dark, never knowing if anyone will see them. Then, one day, something green breaks through the soil in a place you had given up on. My relationship with James grew the same way. Not perfect, never simple. We argued about security, about schedules, about his habit of solving problems with money, before asking whether money was the right solution. He learned to ask. I learned to accept help without feeling owned by it. He learned to say what hurt. I learned that tenderness did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it looked like a warm coat waiting by the door after a night shift, or a message that said, "Eat something, Felix," without ordering me to do it. Belle, of course, considered the matter settled long before either of us did. She called me Mommy Felix one afternoon while coloring at the kitchen table. I dropped an entire spoon into a bowl of soup. James froze across from me. Belle looked up innocently. "What?" Daddy smiles when I say it. James cleared his throat. "Daddy does not. Daddy does," she said. My mother laughed so hard she had to sit down. Months passed. The seasons changed. The memory of the rainy airport became something we could speak about without shaking. Belle's nightmares faded. James's smiles came easier. I still worked at the hospital. Fewer double shifts now, because James and my mother had formed an alliance against my self-destruction. Then, on a golden afternoon in a meadow behind the estate, with Belle chasing butterflies through tall grass and sunlight, turning everything soft, James took my hand. I knew something was different before he spoke. His palm was warm, but his fingers trembled. "Felix," he said. I looked at him, smiling. "You look like you're about to negotiate a merger with the sun." "I am more nervous than that." That made my smile fade into something tender. He took a small velvet box from his pocket. Belle, who was supposedly distracted by butterflies, immediately shrieked, "Now, Daddy! Do it now!" James closed his eyes for half a second. She was meant to wait. "She is 4, I said, laughing through the sudden blur in my eyes. "Her patience is theoretical." He went down on one knee in the grass. The great James Sterling, billionaire Alpha, the man who had once looked like nothing in the world could bend him, knelt before me with sunlight in his hair and fear in his eyes. "You saved Belle," he said, voice thick. "But you also saved me." "You challenged every broken thing I believed about people. You taught my daughter that kindness finds its way back. You taught me that a home is not built from walls, money, or control, but from the people who choose to stay." He opened the box. "Felix Anderson, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that the worst day we met can become the beginning of everything good?" Belle bounced nearby, both hands over her mouth and failing to stay quiet. I looked at James. I looked at the ring. I looked at the child who had somehow pulled 2 wounded adults into the same orbit and refused to let us drift apart. "Yes," I whispered. Belle screamed loud enough to scare every butterfly in the meadow. James rose and pulled me into his arms. His kiss was warm, careful, and full of every word he still struggled to say. When Belle crashed into our legs demanding a family hug, we folded around her, laughing and crying in the sunlight. Our wedding became the kind of event newspapers like to describe with words like lavish and breathtaking, though none of that mattered much to me. There were flowers everywhere, music soft enough not to overwhelm Belle, and my mother crying proudly in the front row while pretending the tears were allergies. The hospital staff came. Mrs. Gable came with several children from the care home. Even the security chief smiled in photos because Belle threatened to withhold cake. James looked at me as I walked toward him like the entire world had narrowed to a single miracle. When we said of our vows, his voice shook. "I once believed power meant never needing anyone," he said. "Then I lost my daughter and discovered that all my power could not lead me out of the dark."
"You did? You brought Belle home! You brought me home!"
"I promise to honor your heart, your work, your mother, your stubbornness, and every ordinary day you choose to share with me." I laughed through tears at the word stubbornness because he had earned the right to say it. My vows were simpler. "I promise not to let you buy an entire building every time you feel emotionally uncomfortable," I said, and the guests laughed. Then I looked into his eyes. "And I promise to love you when you are strong, when you are afraid, when you are silent, and when you finally find the courage to speak. I promise to love Belle as the gift she is. I promise to build a home with you where nobody has to be perfect to be safe." Belle carried the rings with absolute seriousness and then announced to everyone that she had made the family happen. She was not entirely wrong. That night, after the guests left and the flowers slept in silver vases, James carried me over the threshold of the home that no longer felt too large. He set me down gently in the room we had chosen together, Not because it was grand, but because the morning light reached it beautifully. For a long moment, we simply stood there, forehead to forehead, hands clasped. "Are you happy?" he asked. I thought of rain on airport glass. Identical suitcases, a photograph falling to the floor, a little girl crying for her daddy in the woods, my mother's dumplings, bear slippers, Belle's small hand in mine, James learning to laugh again. "Yes," I said. "I think I have been walking toward this since the moment I picked up the wrong suitcase." He smiled, and it was no longer a rare crack in a cold mask. It was open, warm, mine. Years later, people would ask how we met, and Belle would always answer before either of us could. "Daddy lost his suitcase," she would say proudly. "But he found us!" And eventually, when Belle was older and the house had filled with even more laughter, we gave her a little brother named Ramsey. She took her role as big sister very seriously, informing everyone that she had already saved the family once and could probably manage another child. Our life was not a fairy tale because nothing real is perfect. There were hard days, memories that returned with rain, arguments that needed patience, and fears that did not vanish just because love arrived. But there was also breakfast at Maria's table, Belle's drawings on the refrigerator, James falling asleep with a baby on his chest, hospital children receiving better care because one lost girl had once waited there, and a home where kindness kept growing from seeds planted in the dark. And every time I saw an airport suitcase, black and ordinary and waiting beside some stranger's feet, I smiled. Because once by accident I took the wrong one. And somehow, inside that mistake, I found the life I was always meant to carry.